And I went, took me 4 years to get a BA. Then I came out and went to theological school. It took me 6 years to get a doctorate degree. But he got a BA and a MA in 4 years and is now a city councilman. We have something to be proud of. Stockton. I was thinking about Dr. Martin Luther King. He skipped the 9th and the 11th grade and graduated from high school when he was 15 years old. Went on to Morehouse College. He wasn't actually interested in theology at the time, but we met Benjamin Mays, Reverend Benjamin Mays, inspired him to follow a theological path, and went on to school and graduated from Crozier Seminary as the outstanding student of his class. We have one of the outstanding citizens of Stockton here, a young man that we are very proud of, that's following the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. May I introduce to you, introduce to some and present to others, Councilman Michael Tubbs.
What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Langston Hughes, 30 years before Dr. King even articulated a dream, he said, "America, what happens to a dream deferred?" And I submit to you tonight that here in Stockton, California, lies the answer to that question. What happens to a dream deferred? What happens when the prophet gets up and speaks to the nation about economic freedom, about independence, about social justice, about equality? What happens when that's articulated, but it's not yet fulfilled? What happens to a dream deferred? So good evening. It's so great to be here today. I wasn't planning on speaking. I was hoping I'd just get to get the award and sit down, but it's an awesome opportunity to speak just for a little bit to my brothers and sisters in the Stockton community while celebrating such a great man, such an inspiration to us all, Dr. Martin Luther King. So thank you so much, Ministers of Community United, for your service. Congratulations to all the award winners. Thank you so much, elected officials, for being here. And let me say, because Dr. King, what I loved about him and what actually got him killed is that he wasn't afraid to speak the truth no matter what the audience. He would call a spade. Right was right and wrong was wrong. So if I offend anybody tonight, I apologize. My heart's in the right place. I didn't make this stuff up. It's what, at least what I see in District 6. So now all that's out the way, let's answer Langston Hughes' question. What happens to a dream deferred? What happens to a dream deferred? So in San Joaquin County, 47% of all African American families and 43% of Hispanic families live on $35,000 a year or less. That's what happens to a dream deferred. 30%, almost a third of the Stockton community live in poverty, and I would argue another third are one paycheck, one sickness, one life circumstance away from that happening. That's what happens to a dream deferred. A child born in 95205 zip code has the life expectancy 15 years less than someone born in Irvine or Beverly Hills, California, according to the California Endowment. I said someone born right down the street in 95205 can expect to live 15 years, a decade and a half less than someone else who happens to be born in a different community, not because of choices they're making. They didn't choose to be born in 95205, not because of choices they made, but because of what the community they grow up in. 15 years difference. That's what happens to a dream deferred. When a dream deferred, students have to attend a school district that's almost 90% Title I, where 70% of our kids can't read at grade level 4th, 8th, or 12th grade. That's what happens to a dream deferred. When a dream is deferred, the community has to deal with 55 homicides one year and 72 homicides the next. That's what happens to a dream deferred. In my district, District 6, Southside Stockton, it's easier to go buy malt liquor than an apple.
That is so true.
No, I'm serious, because my girlfriend's a vegetarian, and when she comes down, we have to scramble and drive 20 minutes to get an apple. But if I want to get some liquor, if I want to get some cigarettes, if I want to get some fat food, I can get down the street. That's what happens to a dream deferred. When the dream's deferred, we have 9, 10, 11 community centers sitting closed when kids are walking around aimlessly with nothing to do. That's what happens to a dream deferred. When a dream's deferred in this country like America, you have statistics like 1 in 3 black children being born in 2001 and 1 in 6 Hispanic children being born in 2001. That's the expectancy of them going to jail. In America today, not 50 years ago, I'm going to say it again, in America today, a black child born, a Latino child born, has a 1 in 3 or a 1 in 6 chance of going to prison before they even make any choices, just statistically. That's what happens to a dream deferred. When a dream is deferred, we live in a society where we're more likely to invest in the stock market than in people. When a dream's deferred, we live in a society where we'd rather spend billions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan but popularize our schools, like Dr. King said. When a dream's deferred, we live in a society where profits are more important than people, where titles and being important and getting rewards and giving speeches and having events are more important than actual impact. That's what happens to a dream deferred. So to answer Langston Hughes' question in short, when he said, Martin, Michael, City of Stockton, Ministers of Communities United, what happens to a dream deferred? The simple answer is violence. And when we think of violence, we think of what we read in the record. Thankfully, not so much this year, thank God. But what we read in the record about last year, someone killing each other, someone hitting each other, someone fighting. But I think if we're really going to move Stockton forward and reinvent our community, we have to think wider in terms of what violence is. And there was a theorist named Johann Goldtang in the 60s, and he theorized that violence was actually not what we call violence. He said violence is anything. He said violence is the cause of the differential between what is and what could be. He said violence is anything that stops a child from reaching his full potential. He said violence is the cause for the dropouts we have in San Joaquin County. He said violence is the cause for all the homicides. He said violence is anything that stops someone from going from point A to point B. He said that's violence. And then he said we worry too much about individual violence, but there's a thing called structural violence. And I said, what are you talking about? So being the nerd that I am, I was on my iPad in the front row. I had to Google that because that was just really good. The Cesar Chavez singers were singing. I had to Google it real quick. I'm going to use this in this speech. And he said structural violence is the avoidable impairment of basic human needs. So structural violence is the avoidable impairment of basic human needs. Human needs like eating 3 meals a day. Human needs like a house over your head. Human needs like an education that leads to a job or college. Basic human needs like dignity and self-respect. Basic human needs like being able to go to bed at night and not hear gunshots. Basic human needs like having sidewalks to walk down the street and exercise. Basic human needs like parks that aren't taken over by drug dealers and gangsters. Basic human needs, he said that's violence. So when we talk about Dr. King being nonviolent, he was so powerful not because he marched necessarily peacefully, but because he understood structural violence. He understood that embodied in societal structures are things that cause people to pick up guns. He understood that kids aren't born violent. The young people we read about in the record aren't born gang members. They might be born to gang members as I was, but doesn't mean they're necessarily gang members. He said people didn't born and say I want to grow up in a zip code with a 15-year life expectancy. Dr. King was so prophetic as he said, we talk about choices a lot, but oftentimes there's choices out of people's control. Thank you. And yet, like Dr. King in his last speech, he started off saying that if God was with him at the beginning of human history, and God would say, Dr. King, where would you want to live? Where would you want to grow up? Where would you want to do work? And he said, I would stop and look at the children of Israel as they go to the promised land. And Moses tells Pharaoh to let my people go, but I wouldn't stop there. He said, I would go to Rome and listen to and watch the gladiators, listen to the great theorists of the day, talk about politics. And he said, but I wouldn't stop there. He said, I would go and see Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and see them liberate their people from slavery. He said, I wouldn't stop there. He said, I would go to the Harlem Renaissance and read the great works of Langston Hughes, but he wouldn't stop there. And then he said, if I could be anywhere in the world, I would be in Memphis in 1968 when sanitation workers are striking for their freedom. But now 50 years later, I would say I wouldn't even stop there. I would move past the Memphis strike. I would move past Dr. King, Malcolm X, and Robert Kennedy's assassinations. I would move past the 70s. I would even move past the first election of Barack Obama. And I would say, God, put me in Stockton, California in 2013. Woo! And I would say, and God might look at me and say, Michael, that's crazy. Do you read the news? Your city is bankrupt. You just had a record number of homicides. There's a prevailing sense of nihilism and a sense of hopelessness. Why in the world would you tell me to stop there? And I would say, Stockton, California right now is the frontier. It's the battlefield for King's dream and the American dream. That in Stockton, California, we're on the front lines of everything King stood for. Stockton, California is on the front lines of everything that those that escaped from slavery risked their lives for, those that fought in the American Revolutions died for. That Stockton, California is the frontier of the American dream. So when Langston Hughes was talking about what happens to a dream deferred, being the nerd I am, Miss Lloyd, I said, so what would cause a dream to be deferred? Like, how do dreams get deferred? And then I'm telling you, Google is such a powerful tool. So in the front row, I Googled, and I was Googling about dreaming because I thought there was something deep about dreams, but then I found out that too much sleep can kill you. That you need your 6 to 8 hours of sleep, but too much sleep and you could die. That too much dreaming could kill you. Too much sleep, too much faith without works, too much celebrations, too much events, too much award ceremonies without action can kill you. It can kill a community. I think we see that every day in Stockton. And that's not to say dreams are bad. Dreams are good. What would we be without a dream? Goals are good. Goals with action are better. Dreams are good. Speeches are good. Speeches with action are better. Dr. King's dream was only special because he gave a dream, but before he gave the dream, guess what he was doing? He was in Montgomery organizing the bus boycott. Before he gave the dream, guess what he was doing? He was in the Birmingham jail writing letters. After he gave his dream, guess what he was doing? Marching on the front lines of Selma and being beat and spat on and bit by dogs. So he gave speeches, and he had celebrations, but he had some action to go with it. And there's a scripture in the Bible that says that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. It says, a dream deferred 50 years, we still talking about this man's dream and no one's asking why it's not a reality yet. 50 years, too much of that can make a heart sick. Too much of that leads to a generation of restless teenagers and restless kids and kids with ADHD and kids who are angry and kids with hardened hearts because a dream deferred or hope deferred makes the heart sick. But a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. A dream fulfilled gives birth to young people like Michael Tubbs. A dream deferred helps reinvent a community like Stockton. And King's last words were, I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land. And I think we're still looking at the promised land. So I was like, you know what, King used the Bible. Let me figure out how did they go from looking at the promised land to going to the promised land in the Bible. And then I went to Joshua 5 and it talks about how they were about to enter to the promised land. They were on the cusp of the dream. Moses had a dream. And everybody was excited, like, yeah, Moses. No one sees the Kendrick Lamar out here? I don't know Kendrick Lamar fans. That's okay, I'll be up here by myself. For those of y'all that don't know who Kendrick Lamar is, he's a rapper from Compton. And he has a song that says, Martin Had a Dream. It's a really nice song. So in Joshua 5, it talks about there's a whole generation after the dream. So let's say Moses was Dr. King. He was a Dr. King for Israel. We can say that, that's fair. And he went to the mountaintop, saw the promised land, but died before the people went in. So then Joshua stood up, and Joshua was tasked to lead the children into the promised land. So they're going, and it was a whole generation of children who